I'm telling you, this counterintelligence deck is awesome. It's got a great commander right out of the box. It's got a ton of synergies, and just because it's doing charge counters and +1/+1 counters, it doesn't feel like it's lacking focus. That being said, I think there's some easy upgrades that we could do just for $25 that would make this deck a little bit more synergistic, take out some of the chaff and some of the stuff that comes in these precons that always kind of slows things down, but most importantly, making the deck more consistent and more fun on a very tight budget. So the first thing we should do is figure out which of these two commanders is the best fit for being a budget commander for this deck. If we want to take the most advantage out of what the deck is doing right out of the box, I actually think that Inspirit Flagship Vessel is the better of our two commander options here. I love that Kilo is a proliferation engine that lets us tap it and get to proliferate all the counters that we've got on our stationed artifacts and our creatures, but I think that that effect in this specific deck list isn't going to be as effective because we don't have as many things that are tapping and untapping this particular commander. If we wanted to build that, we should just build that deck from scratch. And instead, we're looking at how we can best utilize the cards in the 99 of this precon. So for me, the Inspirit Flagship Vessel is the clear choice for what we can do to best maximize what this deck has to offer. If it's at its first level of being stationed, at the beginning of combat, we can choose to put a +1/+1 counter or 2 charge counters on up to 1 target artifact. And in this deck, we do have some counter engines, but Inspirit is the best counter engine that this deck has available to it. If we use this as an engine to put counters onto our artifacts and onto our artifact creatures, and then we can use Kilo or other cards in the 99 that care about proliferating those counters to continue to press our advantage forward. But we need a reliable way to get counters, and Inspirit is a great way of doing that. And in addition, it has a very powerful effect that once it is fully stationed at 8+ charge counters, we have the ability to give all artifacts hexproof and indestructible. That will make our board basically unbreakable in a deck that cares very much about its board presence. This commander in the command zone is going to make this deck more consistent, and that allows us to save money on what upgrades we need to make this deck run a little bit smoother. So let's take a look now at some of the cards that we've changed out in the 99. So the first thing I did was I took a look at the lands that this deck was running, and I looked at ways that we could cut out some of the lands that either do filter, but they filter for colors that maybe this deck is not running the majority of. They are kind of clunky and can sometimes not be capable of doing what we're looking to do, and slower lands like these scry lands. And by cutting those, we were able to add lands that are faster and more synergistic with what our deck is trying to do. So we've added Ash Barrens, Frostboil Snarl, Fury Calm Snarl, Mirrodin's Core, Perilous Landscape, Port Town, and Prairie Stream to fill out the mana base, and reducing the overall number of lands that were in the deck. The original precon comes with about 40 lands, and a deck that's actually this efficient and good at its mana base, I don't think we needed as many lands as the precon came with. Next thing I did was remove some of the underperformers in the category of being counter engines, things that are putting a bunch of counters on our creatures and our artifacts. So by removing Golem Foundry, Long Range Sensor, Threefold Thunderhulk, and Titan Forge, I was able to add Coalition Relic, Power Conduit, Reckoner, Bankbuster, and Transmorgifying Wand. These are all counter engines that are a little bit better than the ones that the deck list came with, but they're also serving additional purposes like being removal, being ramp, or being a way that we can move counters from one permanent to another so that we can either station the creatures that need to have charge counters or give the creatures that need +1/+1s more buffs as we try to go out for the win. Next, I removed some of the underperforming draw spells in Pull from Tomorrow and Soul Guide Lantern, and replace them with cards like Vivisurgeon's Insight that lets us draw cards and proliferate all the counters we have on the board, and Staff of Completion, that is an artifact that lets us also proliferate the counters on our board, but also lets us draw cards. And then lastly, I also removed our 1 counter magic spell in Swansong and replaced it with a more synergistic artifact removal spell in Dragon Spark Reactor. So this is an artifact that ends up getting charge counters put on it over time whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under our control, but then we can also pay for and sacrifice it and deal damage equal to the number of charge counters that it had on it to a target player and creature they control. So we are getting rid of counter magic, which is objectively better, but I wanted to add something that synergizes more with what this deck list is already doing. On Moxfield, all of the upgrades that you see here are tagged, and every one of the cards that we have cut from this deck list are down in the considering section. So that way you know what cards you need to pull out of your list and what cards you should be adding to replace those. And so that's how you take $25 and with some small but impactful upgrades, smooth out what is already a really great and fun pre-constructed deck from the Edge of Eternities set in the Counterintelligence Precon. If you have any questions or you're interested in taking a deeper dive into my list on Moxfield, check the video description. And if you want to find more of these videos, I will be doing a Precon upgrade guide for all the pre-constructed decks that come out. And I'm also looking to go back in time and look at some of the older pre-constructed decks that came out this year and see what kind of budget upgrades we can make to smooth them out, make them a little bit more consistent on a tight budget. If you liked this video, the most important thing you can do is subscribe. I'm currently on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and that lets me do things like live stream and community membership so that I can keep giving back to you here in the community. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.